Hey everyone, Dale Wyman here. I want to do a quick video on going over the installation of the HDS units on my new Triton 20 TRX from Thayer's Marine. And the reason I want to do it is because I get asked a lot of questions. I mean, I just put my Lowrance units to the test and I use them a lot, and I still am learning. But I've learned a lot and I get a lot of questions. So the very first thing you want to understand is what's connected to what. Right, and as you can see right now, I have my HDS 12 removed and I have up on the bow the HDS 9 removed. So in looking at the various cables, which we'll go over later, you don't really know what's connected to what because the dealers don't hand you a wiring diagram, because each unit's different, and it's different because each customer specifies what they want. So the very first thing I think we should do is I'm going to remove the cover right from the HDS 7 and take a look behind it to see exactly what's connected to it. All right, this one's easy because the way it was mounted, I just have to take the 4 screws off and I can look at everything behind it. But one of the questions I got is when they're mounted up to the front and there isn't a plate that I can easily remove, how is that done? All right, and it's pretty simple. If you open the door on the HDS units, all right, you can just remove the bezel. You really just need to get your fingernail up underneath these areas here, lift a little bit, and you can feel the bezel start to come off. All right, and then just work your way around. You'll see these little tabs here, another tab here. Just don't break them. In some of the units, they just use the 4 screws here in the corner, all right, and somehow they get nuts on the back, and they tighten them up, and that's what connects it to wherever they decide to connect it. But in this case, they did that on this plate, all right, that accommodates up to a 12-inch unit. So to take a look at the back, I don't have to remove the unit. I just need to remove these 4 screws, which I'll do next, and we'll take a look. So again, bezel replacement, all I do is line up these tabs in the corners. It's really flexible. Get them up in there, 1, 2, 3, and then finally down here, there's actually this little one that's a little different here, and you can just bend, right, and snap the whole bezel right into place. Again, make sure that door is open, just makes it easier. Go ahead and close the door back up, and that's how you take the bezel off. All right, now let's get into taking a look at how things are going to connect in the back, and I'm going to pause the video while I remove the panel by removing the 4 screws. It's that simple. All right, so I'm going to resume the video. All I've done is remove those 4 screws, and you can see now very easily how they mounted the HDS 7 after using the template for the cutout. 4 screws, these aircraft nuts to make sure they stay tight. And take a look at the back of the HDS 7 in this case. It's basically going to be my centralized point for the Ethernet network and the NEMA 2000 network connected devices, which I'll talk about shortly. But here's the Ethernet connector on the back of this unit. There are always these yellow connectors. The NEMA 2000 is this black connector, and it threads on, whereas these basically just twist and lock. So Ethernet, NEMA 2000, I'll lift this up and we'll take a look at these other devices, or the other device connections, and hopefully it'll make some sense. Okay, the first one here is our traditional 2D sonar connector, and that's extremely important because in my particular case, it's a through-hull transducer, puck style, and that gives you your traditional 2D sonar that most of us are familiar with. But one of the things I really want to point out is right on this tag right here, these silver tags, it's PDRT WBL. That information is something you want, because when you're going to set up your units, you're going to have to specify the type of transducer that you have connected, and that's where you get it from. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the back of the boat, rip out the 4-bank charger and try to determine it from there. In fact, all I could do is get a picture of it anyway. This is what you need. All right, the next connector right here is the LSS2 transducer used for your down and side scan imaging, right? And then finally right here, it's kind of hard to see underneath, but in your manual, it labels what each of these connectors are, and this one's the power. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up reconnect my traditional 2D sonar transducer, the LSS2 transducer, And all these connections are keyed so that they're lined up correctly and you don't short anything out. So just make sure that they're properly connected before you try to lock and tighten them down. And then to reinstall, I'm just going to make sure all my cables, all right, are back inside of this cutaway section of the console here, and I'm going to buckle everything up and we'll go from there. But the purpose in showing you this is it's extremely important to know what's connected where. In particular, the 2D transducer is connected directly to the HDS7, as is the LSS2. Right? And again, you have both the Ethernet and a NEMA connection in addition to power. We'll talk about that later because it's important when you're setting up the other units, knowing exactly where you're going to source those units from based on the connections in the rear of the unit. All right, so I've buttoned back up the console plate and the HDS7. Now we're going to take a look at some of the other connected devices that I talked about, and specifically the LSS2 transducer, its positioning, the remote temperature probe. Again, that was designated in the transducer type. That RT stands for remote temperature probe. And before I jump over to the rear of the boat, you can see right here that I have the Lowrance GPS antenna. There's an arrow on the front of it. When you mount it, of course, that has to be pointed towards the bow for obvious reasons. You want to see your true heading, and these are an improvement over the built-in GPS units that come in the Lowrance units, and this is one of the devices that's connected via that NEMA 2000 network. All right. Other items that are connected to the NEMA 2000, without dwelling on that, is your newer engines, right, have a plug that connects up into the NEMA 2000 network system that feeds all of your instrument panels. And I have a digital dash up here on the side of my boat, and it gives me all kinds of information, and that is also connected to the NEMA network, and information is derived from the outboard motor. Critical information that you want to keep track of course. So let's go around to the back of the boat. I have it charging right now, but let's take a look at the installation of the LSS2 transducer. And one of the things I want to point out is this device right here, and this is a transducer shield saver. Thayers is now a dealer of those, and I found out about it just from doing some research online, connected it to my old 294 294 Stratos that I used to run before I bought the Triton 20 TRX here. And one critical thing I'd like to point out is they have mounted it exactly how it's recommended. But notice that this is the front of the LSS2 transducer, and the cable comes out of the front. Well, why is that important? And it can be mounted the other way with different types of mounts, but this is recommended way right here by the transducer shield saver company. And the only thing you have to remember is when you're setting up your Lowrance HDS units, is that because this is pointing to the rear, if you leave it set as it comes from the factory or the default settings, where you're viewing right to left, you're really not viewing right to left, you're viewing the opposite, because this is the front, and the left side of your boat would obviously be the right side if you were viewing it from the front, and the same is true for the opposite side. So one of the options in the setup is flip left right. So if your transducer is mounted like mine is, and this cable comes out of the nose, you want to make sure in your settings you choose the flip left right, so you're really viewing the right and the left and looking at objects out to the right and out to the left, so you're not casting the targets on the right when they're really 50 feet over to the left. Also, if you take a look at the mounting itself, you can see that there's nothing to obstruct the view, all right, to the right or to the left from this transducer. Even when my lower unit's down, it's going to stop right here, and it's not going to ring against the side of my lower unit when it's transmitting. Again, there's basically 3 transducers in here, if I'm not mistaken. One that shoots down, and then the other 2 shoot out to the left and right. The remote temperature probe that I was talking about is mounted, let's see if I can locate it. Should be. It's actually, I don't know if you can see it, but it's down there right on the hull, right on the transom. This cable right here runs down, and that's the remote temperature probe that's connected with the through hull transducer. All right, so this is critical. These transducer shield savers will save you a lot of money. These transducers are not cheap, and if you know anybody that's prone to hitting rocks, gee, I might fall into that category. These can help save your transducer. A very wise investment right there. All right, so we've gone over the transducer. The other ones, like I said, shooting through the hull. We've talked about where all these connections are connected to initially, so that's important when you start connecting your other devices and choosing your source. And I'm going to do some more videos on that, but I wanted to cover the basics first. All right, so next we're going to talk about the back of the Lowrance HDS-12 that I had installed here. I prefer to ram mount. All right, I can move it around. When the sun's hitting it, I can reposition it so the angle of the sun doesn't affect my viewing as much. And over here, again, we have NEMA 2000. We have 2 Ethernet connections. And again, one of those is going to connect to the HDS-7. That's going to be my centralized point of these connections for the Ethernet network. I have a second one that's going to go up to the bow of my boat and connect to the HDS-9 power. Here I have sonar, and again, I left it capped. Well, Thayer's left it capped when they installed it because I don't need to connect any transducers to the sonar connected here because they're already connected to the HDS-7, and that would be my traditional 2D sonar that's mounted through hull on this boat. And lastly, this is where the LSS2 transducer would connect if this was my only unit. All right, so what I prefer to do is just simply loosen the thumb wheels up here when I mount and dismount my units, and they slide right in there pretty easily if you get used to doing it. A lot of guys just loosen this up, all right, so this expands and they take the whole bracket with the ball off, and that's easier than what I'm doing up here, but this is just my preference because I take the whole thing inside, which you could do, you know, the same way. Loosen this, just disconnect it from here and haul it in the house. I keep them out of the environment and hopefully keep them from disappearing. So the connections again, all right, would be NEMA 2000. Because again, on these menu items, I can view all kinds of information on my network. And again, they're keyed here, so you just got to get the keyway lined up properly. And as my former boss used to say, let your work talk to you. If it's not going on, you don't have it lined up right. So back off until you got it right. That goes right in. These are just twist locks when it's properly connected. All right, now here, again, the only thing I need, in addition to NEMA 2000, so that I can view my GPS headings, so that I can view engine information if I want to, anything that's on that NEMA network. If I had a radar, that would also be another device that would be connected to the NEMA 2000 network. But here, all I need is power. And another little helper here, if you're new to these units, is these flat sides of the plug on these blue connectors are usually up and down. All right, so that's how I connect this unit. That's all there is to the HDS-12. I would tighten these down, and again, I'll go over settings and sourcing and all that stuff in another video. Right now, I'm just showing you the connections. So let's take a walk to the front of the boat, the bow. And up here, I chose to, well, last time I fished, I had the 9 up front here, and I do the same thing with the mount. Just loosen these, and you can slide them right into place, position them however you want. Again, for, you know, left, right, down, up. Pretty simple. And again, notice, all right, it's part of your NEMA network. So you would simply connect that up. And these are twist, all right, they're threaded, so you want to thread that all the way on so that it's tight. Or all the other ones, Ethernet, again, These are all connected via Ethernet. Is a higher speed network, and one of the coolest things that it allows you to do is share Navionics chips. I only need one Navionics chip, and I can share that information with these devices connected across the Ethernet network. I did another video on YouTube that explains that, but basically just have your code, your firmware upgraded to the latest version, and then have them connected via Ethernet. And under your menu options for maps, it asks you, do you want to have your maps displayed from your Navionics chip or from the built-in mapping information that comes from the factory on your Lowrance units. All right, so obviously if you're going to go out and spend the money on a Navionics chip, which is a good investment, then you're going to want to choose that as your source, and that's what you're going to want to share, obviously, when you have everything connected up. So basically that's my 3 units. And again, I did this, all right, and disassembled it, even though I figured it out on the water just from experience and the menus, what was connected to where. I didn't actually have to go through and document this. But again, it's not something you typically get from the dealer, because you specify the electronics you want, and they really, you know, rig it, connect it, mount it as specified by you, but they don't really sit down and go over, you know, how each device is connected. It's helpful, but it's something that you as the owner should do anyway, in my opinion, because it gives you a much better understanding. And the next video that I'll do, it'll go over how to go into the menu options to do various things for your setup. One additional thing on here that I didn't mention is going back to these connections. Actually, one of them. This is power. This is the transducer connector. Right, double check. I'm sorry, this is power, and this is the transducer. It says sonar right here, and that's in your manual. Is, if you recall from the HDS-12, I didn't have to hook up anything there, all right, because it was sourced off of the 9. Well, in this particular case, most people, all right, when they have a bow mount unit, they have a trolling motor, all right, like this Fortrex, Minn Kota Fortrex 112-pound thrust trolling motor that I have, and it actually has a built-in transducer. All right, my old boat, I had one mounted here, all right, and again, that came with, you know, the right connection on the end of it. It had that silver tag, so you could program into your unit exactly what you needed. Well, if you're doing drop shot fishing and so forth, obviously you're usually up on the bow. Not always. I've drop shot and looked at the back unit before from the rear of the boat, but most of the time you're up on the trolling motor because you want to stay on position. You want to be looking at the fish directly below you. It's a vertical presentation, and therefore you want to make sure on your bow unit that you have that set as the source, all right, for your sonar, because that's going to use the transducer that's either built in my case, to this trolling motor, or the one that you choose to put on the front, which is typically your own preference. All right, so that's why I had a sonar connector here, whereas I didn't have to worry about it on the HDS-12 because they were all connected to the 7. Again, if I wasn't able to figure this out on the water, and that's only from experience and using these units over the years, I would have been a little puzzled probably in the beginning as to how everything was interconnected, and I might be choosing the wrong options when I set it up. So it's important that if you're new to Lowrance specifically, or you're new to the sport and you're not 100% sure on how your items are on your boat are interconnected, to have the dealer go over it with you before you drive out of there. I know a lot of people, you know, me included in the past, you get all excited, you got a brand new boat, you hook it up, and boom, you're home. You're showing it off to all your friends and fishermen and so forth. But this is well worth the time going over and understanding, because you're spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, right, in electronics. If you don't understand how it's interconnected, and more importantly, how to go into those menu options and choose the right sources, then they're not going to perform to your satisfaction, and you're probably going to mistakenly blame it on the devices or the manufacturer themselves, and that's very rarely the case. The most important thing that I tell people over and over and over, the most critical thing, is the transducer installation. Without the transducer installations being correct, you're not going to have that valuable information that you need for viewing structure, all right, for cover, and more importantly, seeing those fish the way you want to. So I hope this helped, and I will do some future videos, a couple on the water, and then probably some more here going over the menu items. Again, hope this helped. Dale Wyman.